I think back to my favorite works of fiction, and they didn't lie to me, even though, by definition, fiction is a lie. Hello and welcome. My name is Tom Levine, and this is a deep dive into Stephen King's Danse Macabre, his notorious nonfiction novel that came out many, many decades before On Writing, and happens to be one of my favorites. I am an award-winning novelist and also a Bram Stoker Award finalist, which I need to pause and talk about because every time I do a little intro or somebody asks me for my bio, that kind of thing, I always mention that I'm a Bram Stoker Award finalist. But I never talk about the fact that I'm a Bram Stoker Award finalist and how fucking cool that is. You know, it's ridiculous. Right now, the point is, I don't talk about it, and I'm going to talk about it right now because it's fucking cool. It is really fucking cool that I got nominated for a Bram Stoker Award. I made it into the finals. I'm a finalist. Didn't win it that year. Okay, but I made it, and that was really awesome, and I'm very proud of that. So, yeah, you need to check out HELLWORLD, which is the book that was nominated. The thing about this book, it's full of monsters, which is great if you're into monsters. I did so much research on this book and it was great. It was such fun research to do, and it really gets into some awesome religious slash philosophy type things about the nature of the world that we live in and some certain holy books that you may have heard of. But if you're an author, if you're a writer, one of the reasons you should absolutely pick up HELLWORLD is the structure. I struggled with the structure of this book for so long until I finally hit upon the right sequence of things. And what we have is a parallel storyline in the past and the present. And the past and present sort of begin to intersect as the story goes on. And I'm really proud of how that turned out. I'm also particularly proud of this novel because of the way it ends. Now, you might get to the ending and be like, what the hell just happened? It's not a twist. I can tell you that right now, but it's a different kind of ending. And the reason that it's a different kind of ending is because this book, out of all the novels I've published in the last, 15 plus years, this book is a metaphor for something. And I don't want to give it up now just in case you need to run out and buy it today, which you really should. It's available on Amazon and pretty much any bookstore retailer should be available. So, great book, lots of scary monsters, lots of fun relationships, of course, because that's the thing that I do with my books, and a metaphor that runs throughout the book and should become clear by the end of the book. Like literally the last page of the book is how far you got to get to make the metaphor make sense. But really, really proud of HELLWORLD by Tom Levine. Go check that out. On to Stephen King's Danse Macabre. On page 17, when we last left little Stevie King, he was at a movie watching Earth versus the Flying Saucers when suddenly all the lights came up and nobody knew what was going on. And we're going to pick up from there. This is section 2 of chapter 1, An Invitation to Dance. If there is any truth or worth to the Danse Macabre, it is simply that novels, movies, TV and radio programs, even comic books dealing with horror always do their work on 2 levels. That is a great opening line. I'm going to keep going because I want to see where he's going with this. On top is the gross out level, when Regan vomits in the priest's face or masturbates with a crucifix in The Exorcist, or when the raw-looking, terribly inside-out monster of John Frankenheimer's Prophecy, oh my god, I love that movie, Prophecy crunches off the helicopter pilot's head like a Tootsie Pop. Have you seen Prophecy? I have. Dude, check this out. I have the original movie adaptation of Prophecy, which was written by David Seltzer, a story of unrelenting terror by the author of The Omen, David Seltzer. Dude, if you haven't seen Prophecy, I actually had this movie on, maybe I still do. I had this movie on VHS for decades. It's one of the first movies I ever rented, again, as like a 7, 8, 9 year old. Like I was no more than 10. I guarantee you I was no more than 10 when I picked up this book. And the cover of the novel here is pretty close to the cover of the VHS tape, and it's creepy. It's Prophecy is one of those ones. I mean, on a certain level, it's still chintzy. It is still cheesy as hell, absolutely. But it's also really pretty disturbing and really cool as a monster movie. The monster is awesome. Talking about any horror story, they do their work on two levels. The first is the gross out level, right? The gross out can be done with varying degrees of artistic finesse, but it's always there. But on another more potent level, the work of horror really is a dance, a moving rhythmic search. I actually have this highlighted in my copy of the book. So it must be important. Let's see. And what it's looking for is the place where you, the viewer or the reader, live at your most primitive level. I like that a lot. The work of horror is not interested in the civilized furniture of our lives. Such a work dances through these rooms, which we have fitted out one piece at a time, each piece expressing, we hope, our socially acceptable and pleasantly enlightened character. It is in search of another place, a room which may sometimes resemble the secret den of a Victorian gentleman, sometimes the torture chamber of the Spanish Inquisition, but perhaps most frequently and most successfully, the simple and brutally plain hole of a Stone Age cave dweller. Before I move on, let's talk about that a little bit. I love this assessment of horror. I think the reason that I highlighted it, this would have been years ago when I was working my way through the book. I think the reason he highlights it, or that I highlighted it here, is because it's something that I crave to accomplish as an author. If I can do this, if I can give you in my case, usually speaking, a novel that makes you crawl into that Stone Age hole, right? That place of terror. And he's going to talk about the difference between terror and horror and dread and suspense and all those things here in a little bit. But if I can take you to that place as a storyteller and have you get in touch with that primitive area of your brain, then I would consider that a success. One of the things, I was watching a movie, I haven't finished it yet. I don't know if I will yet. My friend Ian and I are horror movie watchers. He has a deep, deep bench of horror movie knowledge that I lack, but he's always recommending movies to me, and we talk about them after we've seen them and things like that. And I'm not going to name it because I haven't finished it yet, so I want to wait and see. But there's a movie I started watching and then I had to stop because it was definitely it was breaching my gore limit. Like I can't go that far. And the thing about some of these movies is it's not the gore itself so much as it is the psychological element of the gore. Like you can make a gore fest and it's gross and whatever, and that can be disturbing and whatever, cool. I think some of the late 70s, early 80s gore, like from Dawn of the Dead, for example, like that's gory, but it's kind of silly too, right? Like that's plastic. Yeah, that's not a dude's face, that's fake. And so I can handle that when it looks so chintzy that you know it's fake. But it's not even the level of reality. It's the story and the character behind the gore. And this particular movie, like it felt too close to home, I guess. It plucked that chord in me. There's like too much, I'm out, I can't do it. And I think when King here talks about that primitive level of horror, when whether it's the gross out or something else, that's what he's talking about. And it's different for everybody. So I have written one novel called Now You Don't, that is absolutely a body horror book, because I wanted to see how far I could go before I tapped out, right? And it's gross. I'm going to tell you right now, if you read, and you should, if you're a horror fan, you should read Now You Don't. It's a very short, brisk read, full of gore, full of body horror, and that book represents about the furthest I can go. And I've read books that go a lot further than that. I've certainly seen movies that go a lot further than I did. But if you're interested in knowing where my limit is, that's pretty much it. Most of my work, HELLWORLD, for example, or the stuff I'm working on right now, I'm working on a series called the October Chronicles. And the October Chronicles is full of monsters and ghosts and the supernatural and all the cool, fun, Saturday morning, world beyond type stuff that I can cram into these books. But they're not super gory. There's some moments that I will definitely go for the gross out, but it's not really meant to be a gross out series or a gross out book. I do think, though, the point I was trying to make and all that is that whether we're talking about the story or the characters or just the gore factor and how explicit that writing is or that visual is, it's reaching into a place that makes us go, what would I do in that scenario? I think good horror will frequently do that. If it's not just an escape, obviously horror is an escape mechanism, but I think it's also almost a teaching tool, if I can say that, where the story posits the question, what would you do in this scenario? And honest to God, I won't name them right now, but there's a couple of movies that I want to show my children specifically so that I can pause and go, what would you do here? At this point, what would you do? Just to see. Like, it's one of those, it's a good, teachable moment, When Michael Myers comes into your house with a butcher knife, what do you do? It's fun. Anyway, that's enough of me. Let's go back to King. We're not going to get very far today, I don't think. All right, King continues. Is horror art? On this second level, the work of horror can be nothing else. It achieves the level of art simply because it is looking for something beyond art, something that predates art. It is looking for what I would call the phobic pressure points. Ooh, that's a good term. Let's come back to that. The good horror tale will dance its way to the center of your life and find the secret door to the room you believed no one but you knew of. That's a great point. Let's come back to that. As both Albert Camus and Billy Joel have pointed out, the stranger makes us nervous, but we love to try on his face in secret. This is such a great metaphor. The phobic pressure point in which the good horror tale will find the secret door to the room you believed no one but you knew of. Horror touches on our secrets. I think that's another way to kind of phrase that or to look at it. Horror touches on the things that you thought nobody else knew about you. Turns out somebody did. And I mean, that's true of all good fiction, isn't it? There's a book called The Black Box. I always forget the author's name. I want to say Rebecca something, but I think I'm wrong. Anyway, what I remember most about The Black Box actually was that at the end of it, the author had an afterword where she said, "Good fiction has never lied to me." And I love that sentence because I think it's true. I think as soon as you read or hear that line, something as a reader, something should kind of resonate for you when you think back to your favorite fiction. And I think, for me, it was like, yeah, I think back to my favorite works of fiction and they didn't lie to me, even though by definition, fiction is a lie, right? But good fiction won't lie to you. It won't deceive you. I think to connect with what King is saying here, good fiction sees you and recognizes you. That's certainly something I try to do in my work is I want my readers to feel seen, to feel heard, to feel like, okay, I'm not alone in whatever it is life has thrown at me thus far. Horror does the same thing, just on I don't want to say a deeper level, but a more primitive level, which is the word he's already used once or twice. All right, going on. Do spiders give you the horrors? Yes, they do. Thank you, Stephen. Fine, we'll have spiders, as in Tarantula, The Incredible Shrinking Man, and Kingdom of the Spiders. I love all of those movies. God, they're so good. Oh my God, I actually didn't plan on this. I also happen to have the paperback of Kingdom of the Spiders, starring William Shatner. Who wrote this? Kingdom of the Spiders. Oh, it doesn't even put the author's name on the cover. Wow, that's awful. It's all about the book. Oh, here we go. Novelization by Bernhardt J. Herwood. Wow. I wonder if that's a pen name. That sounds like a fake name to me. Bernhardt J. Herwood. So yeah, I've totally got and it has pictures, of course, black and white photos in the middle. I love this movie. I have this on DVD. I probably watch this maybe not once a year, but every few years it's worth watching because it's just so much fun. If you haven't seen Kingdom of the Spiders, you must. Also Tarantula, which I believe is the black and white movie, and then Incredible Shrinking Man I've seen once or twice. Haven't seen it recently, but that would definitely, I should add that to my October list and see if I can dig that up on streaming somewhere. Okay, going back to the book. What about rats? In James Herbert's novel of the same name, you can feel them crawl all over you and eat you alive. How about snakes? That shut-in feeling? Heights? Or whatever there is. Because books and movies are mass media. Please highlight that if you're taking notes. Books and movies are mass media. And again, I've said it before, there is nothing wrong with that. Books and movies are mass media. The field of horror has often been able to do better than even those personal fears over the last 30 years. Now, again, just a reminder, when he says the last 30 years, he's talking 60s, 70s, and maybe the 80s, and a little bit into the 80s. Probably actually 50s, 60s, and 70s, because the book came out in 1981. During that period, and to a lesser degree, the 70 or so years preceding, the horror genre has often been able to find national phobic pressure points, and those books and films which have been the most successful almost always seem to play upon and express fears which exist across a wide spectrum of people. Such fears, which are often political, economic, and psychological, rather than supernatural, give the best work of horror a pleasing allegorical feel. Totally agree with that. And it's the one sort of allegory that most filmmakers seem at home with. Maybe because they know that if the shit starts getting too thick, they can always bring the monster shambling out of the darkness again. We're going back to Stratford in 1957 before much longer, but before we do, let me suggest that one of the films of the last 30 years to find a pressure point with great accuracy was Don Siegel's Invasion of the Body Snatchers. Further along, we'll discuss the novel, and Jack Finney, the author, will also have a few things to say, but for now, let's look briefly at the film. All right, I'm going to stop there. We're going to go back to Invasion of the Body Snatchers next week. I should go watch that before next week, so somebody send me a note to self. Yeah, the last thing I'll say about this as we kind of wrap up for the day is the pleasing allegorical feel of horror. I totally agree with that. It's something I teach in my classes a lot when we talk about horror, is that horror is almost always, good horror is almost always about something else, meaning there's an allegory behind it. I mentioned HELLWORLD earlier. This book, HELLWORLD, is a monster story. It's a horror novel asking the metaphorical question, what do you do with that? What do you do when someone you love falls victim to the worst fucking monster on earth, as far as I'm concerned? Well, you'll have to read the book to find out my answer to that. But it underscores the point that horror is often about something else. The thing I struggle with is doing it with intention. HELLWORLD is one of the few novels that I wrote with that intention. Most of my work I don't set out to find an allegory or create one or to uncover a metaphor. I'm much more somebody who is going to write a horror story first to thrill you, like we talked about recently, because that is my job as the author, as the storyteller, is to thrill you. If I don't thrill you, I have not done my job. If in the writing or in the revision, I discover an allegory or a metaphor that I can pull out, great, I'm happy to do that. Frankly, I'm still learning how to do that because it's not something I've studied a lot. But I have seen it in other works, whether that's in film or in fiction, in writing. But I'd love to learn how to do it a little bit more intentionally because I think that will bring a resonance and a depth to the writing. That being said, my horror stories are here to entertain you. My horror stories are here for you to read when you cannot deal with Alzheimer's, when you cannot deal with the cancer, when you cannot deal with work or family or whatever it is that is stressing you out. To me, and again, that's what King says here earlier about mass media. It's to give you an escape. It's to bring you somewhere else. And I hope I can do that for you. So, all that being said, I hope this was helpful for you. Hope you enjoyed it. We only got to page 18, but at least to the bottom of page 18. Next week, we'll talk about Invasion of the Body Snatchers because I need to go see that before we talk about it. Make sure I have seen it, but I want to double check my notes. And if you're interested in more of my work as a horror author, you can head over to tomlevine.com/horror, which I know I always have to pronounce very carefully. Horror. tomlevine.com/horror. I hope you'll take a look. And in the meantime, enjoy your horror, whatever format you like it in, and we'll see you again next week. Take care. Keep writing. Keep reading.